It is Key Talk, yours truly, Coach AmberJ, and it is Major Key Alert. Today we are dropping major keys, and I am your host, Coach AmberJ, your CEO, life coach, wardrobe expert. And you are here on the podcast today. Y'all, behind the scenes is crazy, y'all. So I'm just letting y'all know. Let me get myself together. So this podcast is all about unlocking the keys to a successful work-life balance so that you can have more fulfillment without burnout, all while doing it and looking and feeling your best. Join me as we dive into powerful conversations that will inspire you to shift your perspective and become the master key of your own life. We'll explore how to release past pain and trauma and embrace your life purpose, serving others on this journey to greatness. So if you're ready to step into your power and elevate your life in style and in confidence, let's get started and unlock those keys together. So as you guys know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I just want to recap on last week's show. Let me know if you guys watched last week and drop a number 1 in the chat if you did. But last week I talked about my journey as being both a survivor and an abuser of domestic violence, emphasizing the need for awareness and healing. And let's continue to support one another on this journey towards actual being free from violence in general. So today's podcast is very dear and near to my heart. The title of this podcast is Whispers in the Darkness, Remembering Joy and the Unheard Cries for Help. So so this is actually going to be a very emotional conversation today because this is dedicated to my best friend who lost her life due to domestic violence taken at the hands of her boyfriend. So I'm dedicating this whole episode to her and this month because domestic violence is very near and it's real. And I want to share on how we can help other people in those times of the silent cries that sometimes we miss or we judge. And so I'm just going to talk about a little bit about that story. So trigger alert, make sure that you guys are aware that this will be a trigger alert. And anyone that's going through this situation, know that you're not alone, that there is resources and there are people available to help you if you want to get out and need an escape. So this is where this story began with Joy. Joy was more than just my friend. We've been friends since the 7th grade. She was like my sister I never had. She is my son's godmother, the babysitter. She was my ride or die, my hairstylist, my secret keeper, and was lost at the tragedy of her boyfriend. And it was in 2008. I remember she finally called me in June and was like, I'm ready to leave. And at that time, I hadn't talked to her in months. And so she called and she's like, I'm ready. So at the time I was living here in Las Vegas and I told her I would be in Fresno that weekend and I would come get her and she can come back with me to Vegas. I had a 3-bedroom apartment at the time and I was like, there's more than enough room for you to be here. So our plan, we created a strategy and a plan. I came out there that Thursday, planned to leave that Sunday with her and us conversating about helping her escape. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And so I'm going to share the story, y'all. It was that Friday, her boyfriend actually called me and was like, Joy is not going anywhere. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I know you're in Fresno, but Joy is not going with you. And I was like, okay. Again, I'm not saying much because I don't know the state of mind he's in, but I know that from the conversations and the multiple calls and domestic violence incidents that happened with Joy, I knew I had to be very careful and cautious on what I said and not to alert him. Saturday morning came, and at 3 a.m. that morning, I missed a call. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, my brother called me and he's like, sis, where you at? I'm like, I'm at dad's house. What's up? He's like, I'm on my way to come get you. Something happened to Joy. And he picks me up. We're flying down the freeway, going to her apartment. As we arrived, there is yellow tape, police everywhere, and I got the news Joy did not make it. She was found dead in her apartment. Yeah. So I was never able to bring Joy home with me. And there's a series of things that took place. There's a series of help that was, the cries that were missed, the help that was missed with the police, the authorities. There was multiple domestic violence calls, police brought out, sheriffs brought out, and time again, no one actually heard Joy, and Joy died at the hands of her boyfriend, which in reality is really a sad case because her death was considered a suicide years later, then convicted as a homicide, but because the police again didn't do a thorough investigation and she didn't have the support that she needed from other people to fight on her behalf, she was just another case that was considered suicide, when we all know, and I know with the calls and me telling the police everything that transpired days before, was not enough evidence to convict her abuser. So I share all of this to share that domestic violence is very real. And it's important that we are being very sensitive to the people that are enduring this kind of pain, this kind of suffering, but more than anything, being very present in a help instead of a judgment. And one of the things on that conversation that I had when her boyfriend called was, as now I reflect on it, that he was preparing is like, no one cares about her. Her family doesn't care. She's, the word he used was she's suicidal and on suicide watch or something in that sense. And I'm like, no, I just talked to her. Like he already prepared to set up what his ending was for her as she was trying to escape him. So I want to share some keys on how you can support someone experiencing domestic violence, or how individuals can find the strength to seek help for themselves. And so I'm going to share with you 6 keys on how to support someone or even build the strength to walk away. And so number 1, I want to share is recognize the signs of domestic violence, physical signs or emotional signs. Of course, physical signs are unexpected injuries, frequent absences, wearing clothing that covers bruises. Emotional signs are withdrawal, anxiety, depression, or noticeable change in behavior. For me, I knew something was wrong with Joy in this relationship because she became very quiet. She was like a very vibrant, contagious, like a social butterfly. If you knew her, you loved her. She had a smile that brightened up every room, a laugh that was so contagious. And so I knew in the months of being with this person, like our conversations were short. She wasn't available. She didn't sound like herself when we had conversations. So her laugh was gone. Her name literally described her personality, and that to me started to make me realize like something isn't right. Like this is not who she is. And unfortunately, I didn't see her before she passed, but she had told me over the phone, like went from 120 pounds and I'm 90 pounds. So these are things, sudden, unexpected or sudden signs that we can look for. And sometimes people don't have the voice to share, like, I'm ready to walk away. But she was courageous enough to come to me and say, I'm ready to leave. Unfortunately, that plan wasn't fully executed the way that we planned. So key number 2 is create a safe space for conversation, for conversations. Excuse me. Encourage open and non-judgmental dialogue. Like, listen, you guys, it's easy to judge someone in a situation when you're not in it, right? There's so many moving pieces in a particular situation as that, right? Number one, emotions. When we decide to get into relationships with a person, we are vulnerable in a space that most other people don't have access to. So we need to be very careful on what we say. A lot of times, we don't need judgment. A lot of us, or a lot of people that are in that situation or in a domestic violence, they already feel stupid. They already feel judged. They already feel isolated. So they don't need family or friends to come and verify what's already in their mind, right? We need to be able to sometimes not say anything at all and just be present and be a listening ear and just continue to remind and comfort people, hey, I'm here when you need me. Before the conversation with Joy, it was months that every time I talked to her, I had the conversation. I'm like, friend, when you're ready, like, I have a 3-bedroom apartment. Like, you can come here. I can help you get a job. I gave her just the outing, and it wasn't until she was ready. But I never made her feel judged. I never made her feel worse than what I knew she probably already felt. I just listened and I was present. And as a friend, knowing her that long, of course, I wanted to fly out here and grab her and help her. But at the same time, I had to be wise and use wisdom and discernment to move in that situation. But ultimately, God had the final say so. Um, and then let people know, like, just be a listening, present ear. Number 3, educate about resources. There's multiple resources available, and we really need to educate ourselves on where to go, right? Where we can get real assistance, real resources, right? Real plans to escape and be safe. Because a lot of times there's resources, or family become resources, and it's not a safe space. Sometimes it may feel like I'd rather go back to my abuser because this circumstance feels so unbearable. So really finding and educating yourself and being able to share real information and resources is very helpful. Number 4, encourage a safety plan. Like, again, in this space, most of the time, we're not in our rational, logical mind. We're in a rational state of mind, not in a logical state of mind. So our emotions are everywhere. And then again, you're dealing with someone that has chosen a partner to be safe with and to be intimate with. So we're always thinking like, maybe he will change. Maybe my love will change him or change her, right? We have to be careful because we've connected to a person who we think is our person, and it's very that dynamic of relationship is very tricky. So just be mindful of that. But creating that plan, that safety plan, help them outline a safety plan, identify a safe place to go in an emergency, having key words, that you can say or do that will, okay, this is the word that I'm listening for, that I know I can put this plan into place. Keeping important documents and essentials in easily accessible locations. So like passports, IDs, socials, whatever you need, any documentation, having that put somewhere where you have easy access to it. Knowing whom to call for help and having a code word for friends or family to signal when they need assistance. Number 5, empower them to make their own choices. I think sometimes the greatest advice is when we come up with the plan on our own and we empowered when we're doing it. So empowering the person or the victim to make their own choice, remind them that they are not alone and that it's okay to seek help. However, it's essential to respect their choices, even if you disagree with them. Empowerment can come from letting them lead the way in that journey. So for me with Joy, like, it wasn't until she shared with me that she was ready, that she wanted to come, and me just saying, okay, like, I'll be here. This is the time. This is what I'm doing. However, I don't have the answers of like, did she tell him, or all of those things that for years I have question myself, like, how did he know I was coming? What did she say to him? Like, all of these thoughts and things played in my head for many, many years. Even the guilt of like, I should have did something sooner. I had to free myself from that, even that guilt of the pain of like, dang, my friend was taking kind of my hands, and thankfully God has allowed me to be able to free myself from that. But for years I played in my head like I could have did this, I should have did that. What if I would have did this? Maybe I should have said something sooner. But I know that ultimately I did what I was supposed to do as much as I could.
Miguel has a question. He says, sometimes he listens to his family, sometimes he doesn't. Does that affect the outcome?
I think that when you're listening to friends and family, again, you want to listen with sound advice. Family could be as toxic as the situation that you're in, and sometimes it may be coming from a place that you can't see that your safety is important. So I think you have to weigh that out for yourself and help you identify that. That's a great question. But I think when we're in situations, we're also not very logic in some of the decisions that we make, and people can see looking outwardly into your situation what's really happening. So taking it with a grain of salt, I say take the meat and leave the bones. What applies, use it. What doesn't, let it go. So hopefully that helps. Is there other questions?
Um, I know my sister is a product of this, as well as my mother, which my sister learned it from my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And that just shows how trauma is passed down from generation to generation because my mom was with my dad for 25 years. And she
Wow.
stayed for 25 years married, which that was her first introduction to love.
Mm.
So that was instilled in her head of, okay, that's what love looked like. So she went out and found the next representation of what she was experiencing with it. And then I remember getting a call from her that she was in the same situation. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to her as well. So I would just ask, when when experiencing it, once you're once you're able to identify that you're in this situation, um, what would you say is the most immediate response to being in that situation? Do you address it with your spouse first, with the person, and say, speak how you feel, or do you go to external help? Because I'm always told that you have to not allow people into your bedroom. When you allow others into your bedroom, meaning your relationship, you're now opening up opportunity or doors for opinions, which, as Miguel stated, you don't know whether to listen or not.
So I think that when you're dealing with domestic violence, specifically, especially physical abuse, um, I think that it is important to listen to your family because you're literally physically being harmed. So anytime you're in a harmful situation, it's best to listen to advice that will put you in a safe place for the both of you, right? Not just one person. So I think in that particular situation, when physical abuse is happening, it's best to remove one or another so that you guys can be safe enough to maybe later come back and have conversations or determine what that looks like. But most of the time, when you're in a physical relationship where it's toxic and there's abuse happening, you're not thinking logically. And so everything is ran off of emotions and fear and adrenaline. And like you said, sometimes it's passed on trauma. So if I've seen my mother or my father getting abused, then I may think this is normal when in reality it's not, right? So when it comes to physical abuse, I think family or friends should jump in that moment just to make sure people are safe, because for my friend's situation, she didn't make it out alive, right? And I don't know the story of her ex-boyfriend or the guy who was behind this, right? I don't know what his trauma and his story was, but clearly that was a learned behavior as well. And so we have to be able to unlearn things and change them. But in the middle of a physical altercation, definitely it's important that other people are in it.
We have Jason here. He says, "What do we say to women who are attracted and addicted to violent men? Because peaceful men don't appeal to them."
Therapy, coaching. If you see the red flags, and this is another thing that I want to talk about, which is why I talked about my story last week about me being the abuser, because this was a learned behavior. And so for me, apart, if I didn't get the therapy or the anger management, I probably would have been attracted to somebody that'd be like, let's go, let me see if I start the fight, who ends it? Like that was my behavior because it was a learned behavior. So I think it's important that we start to identify people's behaviors and offer that intervention of, hey, maybe you need to go to therapy, maybe you need counseling, maybe you need Jesus. But identifying other people and not getting wrapped up in that. I think that um, toxicity can be addicting, especially if it's your behavior, right? Even for me recently, I've started to identify certain things like, oh man, I used to like this or I used to behave in this way, and I had to identify it. Another question?
Yeah. Mr. Miguel says his mother sometimes is very strict. He is 36 years old, and to this day, he is not allowed to have anyone over unless they are men.
Sounds like Miguel, it's time to leave the house, the nest, and be a man. I mean, if you're under your mother's house, you definitely have to follow her rules. So maybe it's a plan to escape. And let me say this too: domestic violence doesn't only have to be intimate relationships. It can be friendships. It can be family. It can be business and partnerships. Like abuse can come in many different forms when you're dealing with relations with people. So be mindful of that. It doesn't only have to be from intimate situations. We think about that like only an intimate partnership, but that's not always where abuse comes from. And abuse is not only physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's emotional. So be mindful that there's many forms of abuse. It's not only targeted to one set of people. So hopefully that helps. But being an adult man, it sounds like you need to make some decisions to probably, leave the nest and be on your own so that you can have whatever relationships that you desire on your own. Because mother son relationships can also be very toxic. I've had a lot of coach clients that are been in relationships and their parents are a huge impact or influence in those relationships. And I think that goes back to your original statement about when do you bring in outside people into that relationship, that bedroom. If you know you have a toxic mother, she does not need to be in every altercation. If you guys are having a dispute about something, your mother's opinion really shouldn't matter in that moment unless you just don't know how to handle it. So hopefully that answered.
We have Latif, and it says, what was the breaking point that made you want to become a peaceful and loving woman? Escape that learned toxic behavior, and were you ever exposed to the behavior of a peaceful, humble woman prior to it?
So being in jail for 6 days and 26 weeks of anger management has definitely was the key changing point in my life. One, I would never ever want to be in jail, and two, um, in those 6 days sitting in a cell made me realize there was something inside of me that nobody should have that much power over me to be able to get me to react to them in that way. So that was the major light bulb that went off for me. And in my household, my father, and I was raised with my father and my stepmother, I never seen my father raise his voice to my stepmother. I never seen him put his hands on her. There was other forms of disrespect, but it wasn't physical. And to this day, my father and stepmother are very good friends, even though they're separated. But my stepmother was never a disrespectful woman. And so I think I learned that from her. She was very, I'm going to probably say, in my opinion, at that time with my toxic mindset, was a very weak woman. However, now as an adult, I love the way she handled things because she never edged my father on. She allowed him to be, and then she addressed things in private. If there was an issue with how my brothers responded, she addressed him in the room and still allowed him to have his pride and his respect as the head of the household. And so I did see that with her. And I'm so grateful for that because now I'm like, girl, shut up. You don't need to have an opinion all the time. So that is a great question.
This is more of a statement, but it says, with the economy changing, such domestic programs and shelters have closed. Sometimes it's very difficult to find safe havens. Lack of funding programs causes many people to stay in abusive relationships.
Very true. I think COVID proved that to a lot of us. I think during COVID, domestic violence went up tremendously. So I say, if you're in a situation, try to save as much as you can to escape, um, and try to find other resources. You may have to think out of the box. Maybe you can't go to a resource center, but maybe working more hours. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But I think that having a plan, as I said earlier, or creating a plan of safety and escape is important.
Miguel is back again, and he says, speaking of disrespect, well, my stepfather sometimes disrespects me. How do I handle that?
So again, you're in his household, and I feel like being a mother of having sons, I know that that tension there is automatically there because y'all men got egotistical pride and all of that. For me, I think, again, as a grown man in another man's castle, you either follow the rules or you move. You don't really have a choice in that matter. And if you feel like you're being disrespected, it should urge you enough to make a plan of escape to be on your own. My opinion. Um, Again, this is just my opinion. And even when I first married my ex-husband, my younger son at 6 had a beef with my ex, and I had to constantly, like, well, at that time I didn't constantly do this, but at the time I allowed my son's opinion to override the man of my household, and that caused a lot of chaos and confusion in our relationships. So now going forward, like, I have to have conversations with my sons, like reminding them, like, you're the child, like, this is who I decide to be with. Even in the Bible, it says to a man and woman should leave their mother and father and cleave to one another, which means one. So I have to operate the way that my one operates. And so we got to get back to some of those basics. And again, if you feel disrespected, you're in another man's house. So you have to make a decision to move out of his house, or maybe have a conversation in a way that's not going to edge or disrespect him back. But in that space, you got to humble yourself and follow the rules.
Now, Mr. Brown says one question earlier was asked, how long was Joy with her boyfriend? And then Mr. Brown says, how come Joy boyfriend wasn't convicted when he took a life? It's a it's safe. Is it safe for you to speak about that?
So at the time, I think Joy was with him probably like not even 2 years, maybe like 19 months, not long. The way that Joy was, the reason why he was not convicted is because he set it up as like she committed suicide. She was shot in the head. Again, she was 90 pounds with a sawed-off rifle shot at the back of her head. I don't know how that works, but nobody fought for her. No, she was a voice, a silenced voice that no one fought for her. They didn't do a thorough investigation, and again, because there was so many calls of domestic violence, it was like it wasn't alerted. There was pills in the house. So again, I don't know what the whole entail of the story was because I was just a friend. I wasn't able to go and fight and grab details and information, and I was young at the time. But I just feel like, however he set up the night and the scene and the whole shebang, it wasn't enough for the police to fight on her behalf. And I feel like she was one of many whose stories were just unheard and like no one fought for her. So I don't know what happened to him. I don't know. I know that she wasn't his only victim. But again, I don't know why. And honestly, after that, like, I had never seen or heard from him again. I don't even know where he is. Um, and so yeah, it's just another one that wasn't able to be helped. So I'm going to drop the rest of these keys. I have actually 4 more keys I want to share with you. Is be prepared for resistance. Understanding that leaving an abusive relationship is often very complex and can take time. Be patient and continue to offer support, even if they seem hesitant. It's, again, we're dealing with people that are emotional, that are bound, that have learned behaviors, that have lost themselves in this. And this is why I'm so big with keys on identifying yourself, loving yourself. These are why I share these keys, because I understand the power of knowing thyself and loving thyself. Because when you know yourself, you love yourself, and you know how worthy you are, you won't accept certain things. But when you don't have that information, you don't have the keys and the resources, it's hard to walk away from something you don't know. It's scary walking into the unknown. It's scary and fearful to leave something that feels safe and comfortable, that should be, right? So be patient with people. There is going to be hesitance, right? With change comes hesitance. Number 7, check in regularly. I wish that those 3 days I called more, but I was afraid that if I called, he would know, even though he found out anyway. But check in regularly, send a text message, send an encouraging word, send a prayer, let them know that you're thinking about them, that they're loved. Because sometimes in those relationships, they're hearing and it's beat into their head, you're not good enough, your family doesn't want you, nobody loves you, nobody cares about you. So you have to be that sounding voice that maybe just in the back of their mind, they may hear and have enough hope to leave. So you checking on them and just saying, hey, just checking on you, wanting you to know I love you, I miss you, you know, whatever. It means so much. So be mindful of that. And the next one, share personal stories. The dedication of this key talk is for me to share my personal story on how I've overcome, so that other people can know that you can too overcome. You can too get enough courage to walk away from something that doesn't serve you. Sometimes just sharing our experiences gives another person enough hope and hope to say, hey, if she did it, I can too. So my goal in these key talks is to no longer be silenced, no longer to just not talk about things, no longer to just allow something else or allow another joy situation to happen. Because at that time I felt so helpless. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that, you know, I had it all, the answers. And at the time I was only 23, 24. So I didn't, but I knew that going forward, I want to be able to share her story, my story, and how just sharing these experiences could hopefully help someone else. And it doesn't have to end in tragedy. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to thank everybody who has been engaging. Again, if you are in a situation and you need help, there are resources available. I want to give you the hotline, the domestic violence hotline's phone number. I could have sworn I took a note on it, but there is a domestic violence hotline. I will put it in this, in the debrief of this conversation, of the domestic violence hotline. And I want you to take a moment. I want us to take a moment just to honor Joy, because her life was so important and was so precious, and she was such an amazing person. So I dedicate this to you, Joy. I thank you for being who you were to me as a friend. And I know that you're resting, continuing to watch over me and my babies. And I just honor you, and I honor any other person and woman that, or man, that has overcome or lost their lives to domestic violence. I dedicate this to you. And again, in memory of Joy, let's commit to being vigilant, compassionate, allies for those in need. Let's listen to the whispers in the dark and amplify the voices that are often silenced. Our collective effort can make a difference and help save lives. You are the master key. So it takes one key to open many doors. Let us be the key to either help someone else lock or unlock their doors as we continue on this journey of greatness. Until next week, I love you all. Continue to join me every Thursday at 12 p.m. Come down to Nevada, Partners to the Westside Incubator, and let's have real dialogue. Let's have real conversations, and let's implement the keys to change our lives. We don't have to live on trauma-based information or outlive situations. We can be the change that we want to see right now. So until next week, I love you.